Hello students, my name is Moon and this is HE200, the EMT course here at Queensborough Community College. And this lecture is about behavioral and psychiatric emergencies and suicide, chapter 23. And I'm just noticing that this little R here is off, has been word wrapped, and this is my PowerPoint editor and I can't find a way to correct it. So, not my fault. Right. So, right off the bat, when you encounter a psychiatric patient or any kind of emotionally disturbed patient, then your preceptor or somebody in the agency in your vicinity is going to call them an EDP. And EDP stands for emotionally disturbed person. Well, a few years ago, the people much smarter and wiser than myself decided that EDP was politically incorrect and they should be renamed to something else. And the name they chose was agitated delirium, which in my humble opinion sounds like an even worse name to call somebody when you don't know anything about them, especially if we're not actual psychologists or psychiatrists. Who are we to say that a person has agitated delirium? But I guess technically it could be correct from the purely medical terminology point of view, but I strongly recommend you don't use the word in front of the patient. Just say that this person seems to be upset and they need to go to the hospital. So a great tragedy, well, there are many great tragedies, many terrible tragedies in the realm of psychiatric emergencies. But one of the big ones is that the very people who will encounter, the very responders who will encounter these people in an uncontrolled setting like the outside wild world are among the least trained in this kind of area. We'll probably get about an hour of lecture out of this, and that's pretty much it. Then you'll study the pages on yourself and then take a few questions on this, which is buried among all the other chapters you're trying to learn today or in this semester. And that's it. That's your training in psychiatric emergencies. Then you go out there into the streets of the city, and who knows what you're going to get. The actual psychiatric knowledge of the world is in the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, version 5. I believe it's version 5. Let's do a quick check here on version 5. The DSM version. It does sound like it's up to 5. So yeah, that is the official textbook of psychiatry in medicine, Western medicine today, and even that is considered by some experts, people who know about these things, that it is inadequate. And it's a very big book. It's a very thick book. And here you are encountering somebody possibly with a psychiatric emergency, and you only have about 50 slides from this lecture, and that's it. So the irony is that the very first responders to encounter these folks are among the least trained and least prepared to do the right thing. And if you've heard any stories about psychiatric emergencies from your favorite social media or literature, and you will have glimpses of how off the rails things can go really fast. So the big emphasis this lecture is all about scene safety, your own personal safety. I'm not saying that every psychiatric patient you will have will turn into a traumatic episode, a traumatic event for you, putting yourself in danger, but it only has to happen once in your career. Like 999 patients you are called for could be very, very well behaved and calm and benign and very reasonable people. But then it only has to happen once out of those 1,000 times where they catch you by surprise, and then they don't even have to uh, they don't have to be victorious in combat. They just have to get in one bite, one scratch, and then some body fluids get exchanged, one spit, and then body fluids get exchanged, and now you have to go to the emergency room as a patient. You have to be evaluated for various communicable diseases. So and then yeah, so that's really the main focus in this lecture. Your own safety, and then the safety of your partner, and then other members of the EMS system, and then other bystanders, and then finally the patient safety. And then after that, see if you can do anything useful to help the patient themselves. So while I've been talking, hopefully you've been reading this slide and the possible causes of psychiatric emergencies. That's an entire textbook in itself. But here are some of the more common ones, not ranked, not in any particular order. And then the psychiatric emergency is all about the behavior, that something, they're not acting in a way that is appropriate or expected for people in this culture, because that's a matter of opinion, right? So it comes down to what is expected of people in this culture, not in another country, not in another continent, not even in another state. Like what's expected behavior here in Queens, New York, and then any deviation from that can technically be called a behavioral issue. And then if it becomes a danger to somebody's health or well-being, then it becomes an emergency. So I should have, my spiel in the earlier should have been safe for this. They may be violent, they may be potentially violent. How would you know? And the answer to that is you won't. You will not know because you are not properly trained. Hopefully, after you become an EMT and you're out there, that you will keep an eye on CMEs. CME stands for Continuing Medical Education. And thanks to the COVID pandemic, many of those CMEs are now virtual by Zoom. And so you don't even have to get out of your house. You don't even have to put clothes on. So it's very, very convenient. You sit in and listen. Most of the people in a CME is really only there for the points, for the hours, because they need it for recertification. EMTs don't really need that. They just go take a refresher class, so you don't need to get CMEs to get recertified. But medics do that, and then every level above that, they show up for CMEs. Anyway, keep an eye out for advertisements for future CMEs, and then once in a while there'll be a psychiatric emergency CME. And so at the BLS level, they'll mostly rehash what was already covered in your EMT class, except that this time it's going to be like 1 year, 2 years, 3 years from the last time you were in an EMT class. So a review would be a good idea. Sometimes you're lucky enough to get a CME from an expert in psychology or psychiatry, and they'll share a little bit more, like expand your knowledge. And I really hope you take advantage of that, because once again, I need to emphasize, EMTs are among the least trained, but they often bear the greatest risk of being a first responder. Later, as you learn more about psychiatric emergencies, one thing that is important in an assessment this time, well, it's true for all patients, but especially for psych patients, is their affect. Affect, to be oversimplified, their affect is their body language, especially their facial expressions, but also other nonverbal cues. So they could be saying something, but then the way they pose, the way they posture, the way their expressions on their face show, it's like completely not the same message, which should make you kind of like, which would be like a red flag. And one thing that's actually ironically disturbing is a flat affect, which means no expression at all. It's like you're looking at somebody whose face is completely at rest, but the context of the situation is very stressful. It's just that the person is just not showing it on their face. It doesn't mean they will be violent in the next second, but it means that there's a disconnect between how they're feeling inside and how they're expressing it on the outside. With other people, you get a clue about how they're feeling on the inside by what they're doing on the outside. And so, not always, but sometimes you get like a forewarning that they're about to do something violent. But somebody with a flat affect, you'll not get that warning. So if they are planning something violent, you would have no advanced warning. Some of the more common psychiatric conditions out there, again, for the complete list, you can go to the DSM-5. I don't recommend you do that until you go to medical school. You don't need to buy that book. You can maybe go to the library. If you're really, really curious, you can go to the library and flip through the pages. But one thing I need to warn you is it's not only a source of information, it's a tool. And tools can be used for good or evil. Tools can be used competently or incompetently. And as a tool, the DSM-5 or any kind of psychiatric information source it has real danger of being used incompetently. Well, I remember when I was in medical school and we all had to buy it. It was mandatory for the psych class and psychology class. And so, of course, once we got the book, we would flip through the pages, read the different descriptions and symptoms and signs and all that. And then we would start diagnosing ourselves. Like, oh my God, I sound like this. Oh my God, I sound like this. And then the next day in class, we'd show up and then we'd like huddle in groups and like, wait, do you have this and this? Do you feel like this or this? And we were diagnosing each other, and we had no business doing that because we were just students. So the lecturer at of that day told everybody, like, everybody, shut up, sit down. I know what you're doing, and I'm telling you right now, you're all fine. There's nothing wrong with you. Close those books, and let's get started with the lecture for today. So it's even people who are supposed to be pretty smart as medical students were coming to the wrong and horrible conclusions about each other just because they had that book in their hands. Now that's under a supervised education with a doctor at the podium, at the microphone. But if you were to get your hands on information sources like this and you're reading it in the privacy of your own home, it's going to be unsupervised. You're going to start to come to some horrifying and dangerous conclusions about yourself or other people. This is a tool. It needs to be only used by people who are trained and experienced. The people who are trained but not experienced need to use it under supervision. You wouldn't give a gun to somebody who is not trained in how to use a gun, right? So, same idea. When you have a person who is behaving unusually, yes, of course, you should consider a psychiatric diagnosis or past diagnosis, but you should also consider things that cause the brain to act inefficiently or interfere with the normal function of the brain, and that was the AMS lecture, chapter 19. So actually by now you should have listened to the chapter 19 or had chapter 19 altered mental status lecture, because in there you learn about all the ways that anything can interfere with normal function of the brain. And for sure, the brain is in control of people's behaviors. So if a part of the brain is impaired through any of these reasons, then is my mouse showing any of these reasons, then absolutely this can cause a behavioral anomaly too. And among them is diabetes, because diabetes is the great imitator. So anybody who is having a psychiatric emergency, they should have their blood sugar checked. Before you reach for the glucometer, though, you have to remember BSI scene safety. The main emphasis of this lecture is your own safety. Don't be approaching somebody with a sharp, the needle, the finger stick needle, or be even within grabbing range of them until you have ensured that you will be safe doing that. And then you should ask about these other things. If there's any suspicion of these, you should correct it, like oxygen, check them for stroke symptoms, check around their head in case they fell or hurt their head. Ask if they fell or hurt their head. Ask their friends or family if they know if they fell or hurt their head, etc., what they're taking, and then take a note of the environment we're in, not just the temperature outside, the weather outside, but also clues from inside the apartment or inside the house. So we all feel these things in stressful situations, and the fact that you feel it actually just proves that you're normal. But then the abnormal reactions is what's concerning. So not only is the patient feeling these things probably, but you'll be feeling these things. So you need to remind yourself to do all these things for yourself in order to make sure that you stay safe for yourself, your partner, other bystanders, and then keep the patient safe. And then you can start doing the right thing for your patient. So, of the psychiatric emergencies, one of them is acute psychosis. Acute, again, means short term, like it just started an hour or a few hours ago, maybe a day, max 1 week ago, versus chronic. Chronic means it's lasting months to years. And then psychosis. What is a psychosis? This is the definition. Severe break in the ability to process information and interact with their environment. So the information from the environment coming in, the senses, there are more than 5 senses, but going through the senses, and then those signals reaching the brain and then being processed for information, and then the brain coming to like conclusions. Well, that part's all messed up in acute psychosis. Sometimes you may have heard of like subcategories like decompensated schizophrenia. We're really not here to define each of these famous terms, famous disorders, because it's not your job, not our job to diagnose it. It's just our job is to keep everybody safe and transport to the hospital. Assess and then transport to the hospital. Okay, so if you really want to know, then you can Google this, because what you find on Google is not going to be asked on, these are not going to be asked on tests, quizzes, or even the state written exam. Only what do you do about these things? So here are some definitions, and so you can pause and read this yourself and review it yourself. Some of these terms you may have run into before, and so to know this is the more you know, the better you can take care of your patient. So, BSI scene safety, right? Check their affect. So, I don't know about you, but I'm not very good at watching people's faces. So maybe that says something about me, and it helps. It in a way helps explain some of the ways I've lived my life. But I have to force myself to like look at somebody's face and pay attention to their expression to see if they're upset or angry or sad or happy. And then when you are looking for cues, nonverbal cues, then you will notice the absence of one. So the flat affect. See if they are not communicating, being not talkative, not in a conversation mood, or if they are, then see how they're, not only what they're saying, but how they're saying it. So nonverbal cues. Of course, be aware of any bizarre behavior that might be a threat to your own safety. And then here's the key thing. If they if you are concerned that they may be a danger to themselves or others, that is the criteria that allows you legally to force them to go to the hospital. And then you can, if they will not agree, you really should try to first use verbal consent, like get the patient to verbally consent to go. But if they still refuse to consent and you do think they are a harm to themselves or others, then now you can call for police to restrain this patient. You really should. You can, of course, at any moment, at any time, it's okay for you to call medical control. And then sometimes medical control will give you the order to restrain the patient yourself. But the thing about restraints is it's a legal minefield. It's really best left up to the police. Because if you try to restrain a patient and then somehow you do it wrong because you're frankly not trained, we're not training you to restrain people. And so you're kind of making it up on the spot. And then if you do something not correctly, then you're legally open to accusations. So it's better to let the police handle it. Just back off, call for PD, wait for them to get there. Another thing about safety is you always, speaking of backing off, you should always keep a route of exit for yourself. And by route of exit, meaning directly away from the patient. So don't think that I have a route of exit as long as I walk around the patient. No, because then the patient can maneuver to intercept you. And I want to emphasize, it's not going to happen every time. Only once has a patient acted in a threatening manner, and I always was near, and I recognized it immediately, and I always stayed near the door, so it never became a real threat for me. Once a patient tried to urinate on me, but I quickly threw a blanket over his parts. So if he did try to fire, then try to shoot, then it won't have any range. He would just pee on himself. And once my driver, my EMT partner who was driving, as we were pulling away, yelled back to me, some guy with a machete is chasing us. And I just replied, well, then drive faster. And so that was all that came of that. So that was it. That was my experience with potentially dangerous psychiatric people. So always keep yourself between the patient and your exit. That way they cannot intercept you as you try to retreat. Don't get too close. What's too close? Well, I think it depends on the culture, I think. But within reach, within lunge distance is too close. And restraints, by the way, these colors mean it's my addition to your slides. When restraining, you really, really want to let the police handle it. How are police there? Because you did not enter a psychiatric emergency call without police. By the way, when you're called to a psych emergency, you never go lights and sirens. So that is I'm not sure if that's a state rule, but I know that's a city rule. New York City EMS protocol is, if it's a psych emergency, do not go lights and sirens. Obey all traffic laws and just get there when you get there. The reasoning is that this the arrival, the sound of sirens in the distance getting closer, and the sights of bright lights flashing from the street below their window might trigger the patient into decompensating. Or that's the way it's been explained to me. So do not arrive lights and sirens at the very least. But then how are you supposed to know how far away you should be when you turn them off, right? So the protocol was always never go lights and never turn them on in the first place. So that's a demonstration of how getting there fast is not that important. Therefore, once you finally get there, if police are still not there, don't go in. It's pretty much just that. And if people try to like accuse you of something because you refuse to go in without police, let them accuse you. The law is on your side. Just point to the protocol and say, I'm not going in there. So this is for everybody. This is for everybody, not just a psychiatric emergency, but normal human interaction. These are good. This is all good advice, right? Identify yourself to a stranger so they know who you are, and also identify your certification level. Like, hi, my name is Moon, I'm an EMT. And then why you're there. Did you call 911? Speak slowly and clearly so that there's no potential miscommunication, and make eye contact. Some cultures where we come from, maybe eye contact to like an elder or senior is considered rude, but you're in America now, and so here we make eye contact. Also, by looking at somebody's eyes are the window to the soul, as a popular phrase used to go, then it helps you pick up on nonverbal cues like affect. So speaking of nonverbal cues, look at try to take in the whole patient, their stance, their posture, their activity, face expression. Try not to be judgmental. We are humans, so humans become judgmental, but try not to. And the more you do this, the more experienced you are, the better you'll be at it. Use positive body language. And so you don't be threatening. You do not try to assert your authority. Just try to look reasonable, look accommodating, look peaceful, look non-threatening, so that the patient, at the very least, even if the patient doesn't believe you, at the very least, you don't give them anything to trigger on. Acknowledge the patient's feelings. Don't ever tell somebody they're not supposed to be feeling that way, the way they're feeling. This is true for patients, but also true for customers. If you are working in retail, those who aren't, you know what I'm talking about. You're working at a reception desk, the complaints desk, any kind of customer-facing role, you know this, right? Always validate the other person's feelings. Try to let them feel like you're seeing it from their side, their point of view. It'll be helpful. It'll go a long way. Never do this. Never do this. There are a lot of textbooks that show EMTs, see, no guns, no police badges, EMTs surrounding a patient. And the first time I saw a picture like this, I'm like, what do they think this is, a kung fu movie? You are not trained in this. You are not trained. This person, and he looks like he could generate a lot of momentum and might have a burst of strength. What if he turns to one of these and then bites their arm or finger? Now what are you going to do? Well, you have to do what you can, and then whoever got bit has to go to the hospital. You could lose a finger. So and that's like the least of your, that's like the least worst possibility. So never approach an angry looking patient, a potentially violent patient, until police are there. Police have to clear the scene. Clear the scene meaning declare that it's safe to approach, and then you can approach. So patient assessment, scene size up, general impression. What's your general impression of this guy, right? Young adult male, standing, no obvious life threats. That's all. That's your general impression, right? And then get a level of consciousness. Chief complaint, why did you call 911? Maybe this person didn't call 911, but somebody else did. Family member, neighbor, concerned bystander, and try to figure out what the chief complaint is from there. Decide, is this a load and go or stay and play? And most of the time, a psychiatric emergency by itself with nothing else going on is a stay and play, meaning do not go lights and sirens. Take it slow and safe. Always travel with police officer in the ambulance. So ask one of the police officers to ride along with you. His or her partner will drive the police car behind. And the purpose of their presence is to jump to the rescue if the patient goes violent. That's it. And often the presence of the police officer will deter the patient from thinking of anything funny, trying anything funny. Again, the vast majority of your psych patients will not try anything funny, but it only has to happen once. And Murphy's Law says the time it does happen is the time you forgot to ask a police officer to ride along with you. Even if the police officer refuses, you can at least document that. You asked this police officer name, serial number of this precinct number, was asked to ride along, and the police officer declined. There, it's on your PCR, and then later, if your supervisor or authorized person says, how come you didn't ask for police escort? There it is on the PCR. Your proof that it happened, that you did. Okay, so what can impair normal brain function? Well, referred to chapter 19, altered mental status, but you want to check for all of those, the AEIOU tips, which was the last slide of that lecture. Talk to the patient. Now, many EMTs use this excuse of a psychiatric patient to not interact with the patient at all. They don't even try to get vital signs. They just write patient refused vital signs, but the patient never got a chance to refuse. The EMT just wrote patient refused vitals and left it at that. But when I was the ride along, the third or the student, I saw them not even bother to ask. So when I became the crew chief at the EMT level, at the paramedic level, I did ask. I just look at the patient, get a best guess of if they were a threat to me or not, and then if they seem to be okay, and remember, police are there in the back with me. So then I ask, do you mind if I get blood pressure and pulse on you? And then all of them, everybody I ever asked, they just stuck out their arm and said, sure, go ahead. Because if it's a psychiatric patient, they've often been living with it like this disease. They've been living with this disease for many, many years, if not all their life. They've been to the hospital many, many times. They've had their vitals taken many, many times. They know it's not a threatening event for them. So for them, it's just like, it's the drill. It's just how things go. So every one of them, in my memory, I think, every one of them said, okay, sure, go ahead. So why would an EMT not bother to ask and just write patient refused vitals? I don't know. I cannot speak for them, but um, just because it's a psych emergency doesn't mean there's nothing medical that could be going on. Actually, psych emergency is a medical emergency, but like no other medical disease going on, of course there might be. After all, AMS. So it's at least having a solid set of vitals, like two sets of vitals, is good legal protection, because then if somebody tried to accuse you of neglecting a patient's medical needs, I'm like, hey, at least I got a set of vitals. What do you want from me? So I can protect myself legally that way. Let's see. So in the secondary, after you've done the primary, and the primary is all about verifying, identifying any physical life threats, physiological life threats, and then intervening. If it's only a psych emergency, then the ABCs will come up all normal. By the way, you do not have to palpate the chest of somebody who is resting and breathing normally. That in class and on the state practical skills exam, you do have to palpate the chest in the primary. But in real life, you don't really have to palpate the chest unless there's a reason to, like chest pain or respiratory problems. But if the person is, having peripheral artery disease, and so it hurts when they walk, and for some reason they call 911 on that, and they're breathing fine, then you do not have to palpate the chest. Somebody has infected toenail, you do not have to palpate the chest. So with a psych patient, as long as they're hanging out, they're chilling, they're relaxed breathing, they're very calm, they deny pain anywhere, you do not have to palpate the chest. So now you got to the secondary, and you look for these things. So what physical exam can you do in the secondary? After all, if the patient is alert and oriented, then you don't do a detailed head-to-toe, and you definitely do not want to do a detailed head-to-toe on the psychiatric patient unless there's a reason to. But they're just by standing there complaining of depression or agitation, then that's not reason enough to do a detailed head-to-toe. Instead, you do a focused physical, which means you only check the appropriate body systems, the relevant body systems. So how do you know which body parts to check? Go to the laboratory bright space, and yes, I know it says fall 2025, but if you're listening at home and this is not fall 2025, the files will be there for your section, for your semester class. Go to content, and then somewhere along this navigation bar you'll find handouts assessment. You'll find handouts assessment here. Click on that, and then go down here. You find something about like focused. The focused, something that's named focused is what I'm after. And then you go and let's zoom in, and you see that there is a list of body parts to check for a focused physical, for cardiac, for respiratory, and allergic reaction, altered mental status, and behavioral. Okay, so what body parts do you check for behavioral? And the bare minimum is not all this for cardiac. The bare minimum is to check for head trauma. And you don't even have to feel around the head. You just have to look around the head, like take off the hat if they will let you. Always, any patient, always ask permission. But for a psych patient especially, because they may be very, very defensive about covering their head, or have some reason why they will not take off their hat or their hood. So always ask permission, and then have a look around to see if they had any injuries to the head. You may be surprised. You may find a trickle of blood and like, what's this? And they go, oh, I think I hit my head on something this morning. And like, oh my God, well, now you got to do something about that, right? So soft tissue wound treatment is in a future chapter. Always check for medical alert tag, any kind of medical jewelry, like a bracelet or necklace that says, to whom it may concern, these are my diagnosis, these are my medications, etc. The questions to ask are here. So it's kind of a substitute for the OPQRST. The sample is here after all. Because it's like if you ask, if you as the clueless newbie asks, how would you describe the pain? And the patient says, I'm not in pain. You're going to be like stumped. Like, how am I supposed to get with the OPQRSTI if the patient doesn't feel pain? Well, how about this? Tell me, how does the depression feel? Or in your own words, please tell me how your anxiety feels. Don't assume you know what the answer is going to be. Give them a chance to put it in their own words, and don't only listen for what they say, but also listen for how they say it and watch how they say it. So you can run through most of the OPQRST. Some may say radiation is not relevant, but I'm going to throw it in there, and I'm going to say, can you identify where on your body you feel the depression the worst? Sounds like a strange question to ask, but as long as I mask it in like, this is procedure, okay, I have to ask this. Can you please describe? Can you say where on your body you feel the anxiety the worst? And if they say that question doesn't make sense, I say fair enough, and that's their answer. But if they say something else, you're like, oh, interesting, and I'm going to write it down, whatever they said. Severity, absolutely, right? On a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is the worst in your life, how bad is the hallucination? See, this works. Time, when did it start? How long has it been going on? Does it come and go? Interventions, do you take anything to make the psychosis better or worse? I mean, do you take any medications or stuff like that? Or what have you done to try to stop these feelings of psychosis? So I can adapt almost every one of these, practically every one of these questions to a psychiatric emergency. But to help you along, then until you get comfortable enough to do that, then you can remember to ask these questions. Right, so and that's where we were with secondary. So now, suicide, the 8th leading cause of death, 3rd leading cause in the age group for young adults, teenagers, rising in the older population, and it's also among EMS providers. In EMS, the suicide rate is 10 times the national average, 10 times higher than the general population here in the US. Here I need to say this. Suicide, along with many of these other psychiatric problems, it's a damaged sense of logic. If somebody has weak bones and then their bones fracture easily, even under normal daily loads, then the solution is not to force them to go into high impact aerobics training to toughen up their bones. If somebody's having abdominal pains, the answer is not to tell them, well, suck it up. walk it off. Everybody gets belly aches, and you don't see them complaining. So why are you complaining? So that's not the answer. Then if somebody's having a failure of logic, and that's the problem, the failure of logic or the problems with logic in their brain is the cause of their chief complaint, then you trying to use logic is not going to work. But people seem to address depression and suicide with attempts at logic. Why are you feeling this way? Why can't you see how much everybody cares about you? Don't you see what everybody's trying to do to help you? Why are you so ungrateful? Why are you still crying? You have nothing to cry about. You keep crying, I'm going to give you something to cry about. People keep trying to use logic to stop the patient from feeling like they need to kill themselves. And it's not going to work. In this patient's mind, they've come to some conclusion that killing themselves is the most logical thing to do. And that is clearly a broken logic circuit or module or whatever. From the beginning of life, the most deepest instinct is self-preservation. Yet here, this advanced, highly developed life form, that is us, has come to some conclusion that actually the total opposite is the most logical thing to do. So logic is not working. Don't use logic. Instead, use compassion, use validation, use simple explanations, and just tell them, sounds like you need to see a doctor. I'd like to take you to the doctor over at the hospital. Is that okay with you? Just keep it simple. Don't try to reason with them. Don't try to use your advanced psychiatric tools on them. What psychiatric tools or skills? You just had this lecture for about an hour. That's it. So, and then if for some reason you did have like a major in psychology, you were a psych major in college, and now you're an EMT, don't think that qualifies you to be treating this patient. If you are not licensed in the state of New York in psychiatry, then you have no business giving this patient any kind of advice other than, I think you should go to the hospital. That's about that's the extent of the advice you're allowed to give. Things you should ask for, if they have threats of suicide or feelings of suicide. The plan is the big line. The plan is the line in the sand, the red line, that allows you to forcibly transport this patient to the hospital. Because almost everybody has had thoughts of suicide. You know, your game, you died just before you encountered the end boss in your computer game, and you're so sad you want to kill yourself. Or at least you say it out loud in the Discord server or the chat room, I want to kill myself. Okay, people joke about it all the time. If you're failing in a class, or you got fired from a job, you feel so sad, and then you start thinking about suicide. It just happens. It's just part of our nature. But none of us ever make a plan. That's where the danger line is crossed. And then especially if the plan includes gathering materials, investigating or sizing up the place you want to do it. These are actions, and that now definitely this person needs to go to the hospital. And if they refuse to go, they can be forced to. Then you call PD. You can threaten to call PD. Like, if you don't come with me, then police will have to come and restrain you. PD will still ride along, but you can threaten that if you don't come along by yourself, the police will force you to come with me, like that. So at plan or worse, or beyond the plan, then they are a danger to themselves or others. Previous attempts, of course. What are the chances that they'll admit to a previous attempt? Well, if they did, that's really a concern, right? Okay. So, interaction, key here, the compassion, professionalism, validation, simplified explanation, and just recommend to go to the hospital. And then reassess. Reassess what? Affect, general impression, ABCs from the visual only ABCs. Get a second set of vitals if they will let you, and if the transport takes longer than 15 minutes. So here's a example case. 23-year-old male, a friend called 911 after domestic dispute. He is uncooperative and refusing treatment. The bystander reports patient is depressed and suicidal. He has a gun and he's threatening to shoot himself. What would you do? I would get the hell out of there. I mean, is anywhere in this question stem saying that police are there? I don't think so. So I would. He's got a he's got a gun, and he's depressed and suicidal. Maybe you should come with us and wait outside, and we'll have police come in. So it's not about to believe first. I mean, once and for all with finality. No, it's about your own safety. A possible risk to your safety now exists. So back off until police have cleared the scene. Then, once police have cleared the scene and declared it safe to enter, then I will come in. Police have located the gun, or determined there is no gun or other weapon, and so now it's safe for you to enter. Then you do your assessment, and then ask the patient. I strongly we need to go to the hospital, okay? And if he says okay, then everybody comes along. Not the girlfriend, just you, the police officer, and the patient, and then your partner will drive. If they refuse to go, then the police can now restrain the patient. So clues that the patient is acting aggressively. So what you're told, bystanders, the nonverbal cues. Make sure you are always between the patient and the exit. Never threaten the patient. Stay alert for environmental cues that are dangerous. Safety, safety, safety. Safety, 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 restraint. Now, what do we mean by restraint? I've been saying restraint a lot. Do you get like duct tape and wrap him into your stretcher? Well, no. So I guess you haven't had it yet, but when we get to musculoskeletal, you learn how to splint, sling and swath, and splint fractures. And they're using strips of cloth that we call cravats. So you can use strips of cloth. The cravats are they're cleanly wrapped. They're not sterile, but they're cleanly wrapped. And you carry like 24 of them on the ambulance as part of your 800. So you get out like 4, and you tie their wrists and ankles to the bars of your stretcher. And that's how you soft restraint. Police use hard restraints like handcuffs, but the handcuffs really are only to be used to transfer the patient, to secure the patient by the police officer, and they will lift the patient up and onto your stretcher. But then once safely in the ambulance, then you coordinate with the police officers to transition from their hard restraint to your soft cloth restraints, and you just tie their wrists and ankles to the stretcher. Always transport in the supine position or left lateral if they're like vomiting, but never, ever, ever transport prone, because that's how patients die. 2 patients have actually died in the past few years, and those paramedics got convicted and went to jail. A lot was going on with this patient, but the mere fact that they transported the patient prone, despite every EMT program I've ever heard of telling you to never transport a patient prone, that was negligence. Negligence, remember, is they had a duty to act in a certain way. They didn't act in that way, so that's a breach of duty. There was actual harm to the patient suffocated, and there was proximal cause. The failure to act appropriately caused the fatality, proximal cause. So those are the 4 criteria for negligence. They got convicted of negligence, and then they ended up in jail. So, scene size up is all about safety, safety, safety. Reassess what? Reassess safety, safety, safety. Consider restraint. Now, with restraint, I said it's a legal minefield. So your best bet to protect yourself legally is to call medical control for permission to restrain. You explain the whole situation to the doctor on the phone, and the doctor orders you to restrain the patient, and then you get the soft restraints out. Reasonable force is about that. So soft restraints is reasonable force when ordered by a doctor. Sometimes the patient is really, really big and strong, and they're active and they're high energy, and sometimes they may start to fight against the restraint, and then they will actually start to harm themselves. Some police or medical control, just make this your personal policy, whether your protocol says it or not. Even if your protocol doesn't say it, use it as your own personal, professional decision to never restrain a patient without police or medical control. Just to keep you safe. Where was I getting at? The patient who is struggling, so they're struggling against restraints and completely illogically, and they are a clear danger to themselves and other people, and that's called excited delirium. I think I used the term agitated delirium before. Let's look it up. Now that I'm officially on video saying it as if I'm some kind of expert, let's look it up. So let's go NYS EMS protocols, and then let's get to the purple link because I've been clicking on it a lot, and let's get collaborative because I just want to peek at the paramedic level 2. On reading this protocol, it appears that the term excited delirium is no longer here. Excited delirium is not coming up, and agitated delirium is not coming up. They say agitated patient, but not agitated delirium. So, okay, good. When did this come out? July 2025, so only a couple months ago. Okay, good. So I'm glad because delirium was just insulting to say it in front of a patient. And I'm not smart enough to know if it was an accurate term or not, but it was an unfortunate term. Unfortunate choice of words. So I'm glad that it's out. Instead, we have the behavioral agitated patient. And so this is page 47 of the BLS protocol, the combined protocol for New York State. And what does the EMT do? Well, let's see. EMT does everything above. So CFR, airway management, ABCs, vital signs, oxygen, if tolerated. See, if tolerated, because if the person is agitated, they may not like having a mask on their face. Verbal de-escalation, of course. always try to always give the patient a chance to show they are being reasonable and compliant. And then if not successful or possible, then soft restraints such as towels, triangle bandages, commercial medical restraints, only if necessary to protect the patient and others from harm. So not just because you could, but because the patient needed it. Otherwise, they may be a danger to yourself or your partner or the police officer. In fact, if the police officer used their handcuffs, then that's it. They are not taking it off unless they are assured that there's some other way to keep the patient under air quotes control. And then see here, check glucose level, because diabetes is the great imitator, and other causes of altered mental status. So now, this should be good enough for most patients, but there is the possibility that the patient is very large, very strong, very awake, and very agitated, and their struggles against the restraints are actually causing them harm. And if they are high on some drugs, then it could cause them to struggle against the restraints so much that they rip and tear a muscle or even break a bone. So for them, they have to be forced to calm down. But how do you do that? And that's what you call for paramedics. CC is critical care paramedic. In New York City, we don't have the CC. They go straight from EMT to paramedic, and then they give these medications to calm the patient down. These are called chemical restraints. So if the patient, if you've restrained the patient and the patient is still struggling, and you're worried that their struggles will cause them actual continuing harm to themselves, you call for paramedics to say patient is struggling against restraints. Psych patient struggling against restraints. And then they'll send a medic unit. So thank goodness this term has been phased out of New York State. It may show up in New York City though, but that's beyond the scope of this class. So let's see. Once the patient is restrained, then they're unable to protect themselves. So it is all of your responsibility to protect the patient. Don't drop the patient. Don't let the stretcher fall over. Like that video I showed you of the stretcher being allowed to tip. And so you have to watch out for the patient. Especially if they are restrained supine, then what if they start to vomit? Right? So be ready with suction. Be ready to roll them. How can you roll a patient who's restrained? Well, it's just their wrists. You can still roll the body. If there's no suspicion of danger to the head, neck, or spine, you can turn the head and suction from the angle there. So be ready on that. Be ready with oxygen in case the patient suddenly goes AMS and then hypoxic. So all of those things, be ready to support your patient, help your patient because they can't help themselves. Always try calming effects. It may not always work, but always try it. We don't have leather. We only have cloth, and always supine. I'm gonna bold this. And read it because it's absolutely critical here. You're responsible for this patient now. They cannot help themselves, so you have to help them. Patients who are spitting, and they'll do that, sometimes they'll do that, then you can just put a surgical mask on top. Or another thing you can do is put an oxygen mask, a non-rebreather mask on. And ostensibly, is that too fancy of a word? Officially, you're doing it just to give them extra oxygen, but what you're really doing is not allowing them to spit at you or anything or anybody else. Document thoroughly because they could turn around and sue you later. So you have to document very, very carefully. And don't take them to just the nearest 911 facility because maybe they don't have a psych ER. You need to go to a ER with psych ER, which is different. Now, even though your destination is a psych ER, you still have to stop off at the medical ER first. So that same idea, they check the causes of altered mental status first. And then once the medical attending has cleared them, then a psychiatric consult is called, and that guy comes down or lady comes down, evaluates the patient, and decides whether they should be admitted to the psych ER or not. Why would they not after all that? Because they can only forcibly admit a person to the psych ER if they are a danger to themselves or others. If the psychiatric consult decides, no, they're not a danger to themselves or others, they may be very annoying to the neighbors and their roommates, but that's not a danger. And then they're released. They're discharged. That's a common misunderstanding that the general public has about psychiatric ERs. Because somebody may be like howling at the moon, being very, very annoying, and the neighbors call 911, and then we show up and then take him to the hospital. But then they're discharged right away. And like, what the hell's going on with the system? And then everybody has their pet theories about what's going on. But what's really going on is they're not a danger to their own well-being. They're not a danger to other people's safety. They're very annoying, but it's not a danger. So they're discharged home. So consent. After safety, after your physical safety, then there's their legal safety. You have to document very carefully. You need to get consent as much as you can. What's with this forcible restraint then? Once the patient is a danger to themselves or others, the law says they are no longer have decision-making capacity. So they no longer have the right to consent or to refuse consent. That's the logic behind that. When you're alone with any patient, not just psych patients, but any patient, they have the possibility of accusing you of misconduct in the back of the ambulance where nobody else can watch. There's no videos because of HIPAA, and so it becomes their word against yours. It's with psych patients where this possibility is more likely than your average general population person, and that's another reason to have a police officer back there. Not only is the police officer a third person, but a police officer's words are held in higher standing in a court of law than other people, than the rest of us. Whether you think that's fair or not, that's the facts. That's the way the world works right now. So that's another great reason to have a police officer transport with you. Video of restraining a patient, all they're really doing is somebody's holding down their arms and legs, which is probably the officer, and then you are transitioning from the handcuffs to the soft restraints, the cloth restraints. Right, so it's been a lecture, and thank you for your patience, for sitting with me, and I wish you the best of luck, and you will hear from me next lecture.